Welcome! You're listening to Making Relationships Work. We're a company focused on women and their marriage. We lead and teach women just like you how to grow into and access, whenever you need to, your wise woman's self. The part of you who is deeply connected to your purpose, your innate wisdom, and your husband and family. We teach women in marriages how to rebuild trust and connection, to work through conflicts, no matter how deep, no matter how painful, and to lead your marriage to a place where the two of you experience marriage mastery. This podcast is about learning the systems and techniques that truly work to reconnect you back into your marriage so that you can experience the freedom that comes with a masterful marriage. Since this podcast is totally free, if you're getting tons of value and you want to support us and make sure that you get more of this good stuff, subscribe below and rate and review our podcast today. Now, on to the show. Hello, everybody. Hello, women making marriages work. Hello, making relationships work. Hello, people coming to us from our podcast, from our YouTube channel, from our Facebook Live, in our women-only closed Facebook group. We are talking something different tonight. We are going to be talking about the impact self-esteem has on a marriage. Because here's the thing. Self-esteem is something that lives in you, that only you are responsible for. And when it is low, it has this ripple effect, sometimes a quiet ripple, but a ripple effect that goes right across your life, including, of course, your close relationships. Specifically, in this instance, we're talking about your marriage. And so if one person has low self-esteem in a marriage, you're going to notice that there's a lot of associated problems that come with that. And if both of you have low self-esteem, then you kind of get a really interesting storm that usually ends in separation. So let's unwind a bit. Let's talk about what self-esteem is. Let's talk about what it looks like when it's low. Let's talk about what it looks like in a marriage when it's low. And then let's talk about what you do to fix it. Because self-esteem is kind of like any resource. It's malleable. It can be grown and it can reduce and it can be dynamic. Yeah. And so what we can do is talk about noticing where you are, noticing if it's at a level where it's impacting you or not impacting you, in a bad way, and noticing if you want to do something different about it. So we're going to dive right in. So when we talk about self-esteem, let's talk about it in terms of a title, or let's give it a definition, operationalize it if you want to get sciencey. So let's define self-esteem as an innate source of currency that comes to kind of, how do we say this? It's an innate source of currency that allows you to feel good about yourself, your worth, and your value in the world simply because you are who you are, not because you've done something. Okay, so this is that kind of full, let's think about it in terms of a tank. Everybody's got the opportunity for 100% self-esteem, and in different people's tanks, there'll be different percentages. And so if you've got a low percentage tank, you're going to have a negative experience of life. So let's say you've got 30% self-esteem. Let's give it a range, 30 to 50% self-esteem. So you're going to notice that you second guess yourself. You're going to notice that you are worried about whether you're good enough, or people love you very well, or if you belong, or if your husband really likes you, or if you are safe to be vulnerable, or you are able to exist without asking for reassurance. And so that would be a pretty low self-esteem, I think. That 30 to 50% range is not a range that is going to have you feeling connected. It's not going to allow you to feel like you belong very easily, that you are well loved, that you are moving through life with ease and grace. You will be looking over your shoulder and instead wondering, am I safe? Do I belong? Am I okay? Will they still love me? I better do this well, or they won't. That real conditional externalization of trying to feel like you're good enough will be a real problem for you if you are in that 30 to 50% range. If you're 50 to 80%, what it will feel like is this sense of mostly belonging and looking for, when you're interacting in the world, it will kind of feel like you're able to live on purpose, you're able to interact without second guessing yourself most of the time. Yes. So you'll have an experience where 2 out of 3 times you won't second guess yourself, or you'll feel like you belong, or you will kind of feel safe and won't need reassurance. But you still will need it a little bit. So in that 30 to 50%, you need it a lot. In that 50 to 80%, you need it a lot less. Yeah. And then if we look at the two ends of the spectrum, we've got kind of that 0 to 30%, and then we've got 80 to 100%. So 0 to 30 is that I get this image of a woman, but it could be a man, but I'm talking to women right now, where they're kind of bonded together with shackles. And those shackles don't allow them to really stand up straight or to receive light or love or connection or hope or joy. Instead, they're kind of chained and malnourished and unable to give and receive in a way that truly makes them feel like they belong, or that they are well loved or respected or experienced by other people, including themselves. And if I go to the other end of the spectrum, sort of 80% above, I would describe that experience of having 80% above self-esteem as someone who rarely feels the need for other people to validate or reassure or tell them that they belong. And instead, when those things happen, they receive them and they feel good, but it isn't, they don't, their experience of life is not preconditioned on receiving that. That is kind of a bonus, and it's nice, but also not necessary, because they've got what they need internally. Their experience in life with high self-esteem, where they inherently feel valuable, worthy, good enough, able to interact with life in their truest self and be vulnerable and fail and get up and get going and learn and repair and keep going, rejuvenate. And so that is probably the differences in self-esteem across the table. Now, what tends to happen, and now we're going to start talking about marriage, right? What tends to happen is if one person has low self-esteem or lower than 80% self-esteem, and of course, we've just defined the 3 levels, what tends to happen is the marriage starts to look to each other to tell both people whether they're okay, whether they're loved, whether they're well nourished, whether they're safe, whether they belong, whether they're good enough. And so each person is constantly inferring their safety, their belongingness, their sense of value from each person. And when that happens, the human element of mood and fluctuations in own energy and just that innate missingness that most couples have, where one person will be kind and the other one will miss that connection, or do it later and the other person is upset from not having it caught before. And so what then happens is you have this steady decline in well-being in the marriage. So that's one way of looking at it. There's another way of looking at it, which is also upsetting. And that is when you add pressure to one or both of the people that have self-esteem that is lower in the marriage. And that pressure, which is called life, right? Where you've got bills to pay, kids to raise, parents to look after, community jobs, or things that need to happen in your church, or your work-related requirements, or your marriage itself, or just being a human trying to survive in this very fast-paced, low energy, low kind of kindness world. Whew. What happens is when we're subjected to levels of stress that come from any or all of those places for a period of time, is that we start to shut off. We start to shut down. And when we start to shut down, we start to lose that connection with other people because we're busy self-preserving. We're busy trying to survive. And that's our wonderful brain trying to do its very best to look after us. And so what happens in a marriage with one person under a lot of stress, or 2 people under a lot of stress, is that the stress shuts down the connection. And it shuts it down because of when we're connecting this to self-esteem anyway, it shuts it down because we're connecting it to self-esteem. And self-esteem, when it's low, is not able to bank against the stress, because a high self-esteem, let me say that again, a person who has high or higher self-esteem is able to kind of bat away the stress. They're able to have a resistance to not absorbing or taking it on. They're kind of like able to put the umbrella up over themselves and have the stress roll off. Does that make sense? And so when you've got lower self-esteem, you're more likely to internalize the stress as being your fault, as being you being not good enough, as you being inappropriate or not lovable, or you don't belong. And that then feeds the stress. And so what do you do when you're stressed and you're internalizing that as you being the problem? You disconnect from other people to stop the spread of them seeing that you're no good, or of them adding to the weight of the criticism or the experience you're having, which makes you feel even lower. And so the disconnect in a marriage from low self-esteem is real. It's a real problem. And most couples don't know how to reach each other when someone is going downhill. So we need to talk about self-esteem in a marriage, because when we know what is causing the disconnect, and we realize it's something like self-esteem, which is, remember, a tank. So if it's low, we know that we can add new ways of connection to self-esteem to increase it, to grow it. It's a renewable resource. Yeah. And when you know that, then you can look at it quite differently. And so what I want you to learn from this is what happens left untreated. So if you're the person who has low self-esteem and you're the person who is avoiding going near it because you don't want to think about it, because you don't want it to be real, because you don't want to admit in this society that something is low for you, you'd rather pretend that it's fine and that you're doing well, and you'll cover it up with being the perfect kind of hostess or mum or employee or whatever the title is that you're using to show people that you are in fact okay, when in fact you are not okay. If you're engaged in that protective behavior, you're not going to be able to increase your self-esteem, because the very first thing we need to do is to get really clear on the fact that your self-esteem is low. It's not your fault. It's not unresolvable. It's almost not a big deal. It is what it is. You probably inherited it from your beautiful family of origin who didn't mean to do it badly, but perhaps have. Or there's been some experiences in your life that haven't been processed and you've internalized them as being your faults, and therefore it's taken a hit on your self-esteem. So the very first thing we need to do is to get clear. We need to get really real on the impact of low self-esteem and what it's doing to your life and your marriage. And we take away any shame or negativity around it, because you don't deserve to feel bad about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is we start to say, well, we've got 100% of self-esteem in any human. Where are we at? I want you to do a measurement, a guesstimate of what your percentage is based on that scale I gave you earlier. And then I want you to say, well, I'm in the 50 to 80% range, but I'm at the lower end. And I would feel a lot better if I was at the higher end. So my goal is to get from 55, that might be your guesstimate, to 85 or 75. Okay, here's the gap. What do I need to do to start to grow that sense of self-esteem? So therefore, you've got your clarity that there's a problem. You've got a quantifiable goal that you've set. And now we're going to talk about what you do it differently. So self-esteem is the sense of I belong in the world. I am good enough as just who I am, because I am born, and therefore I'm beautiful. And the third part is the part that when you belong and you're good enough, you can exist in the world and you don't need propping up or being told how wonderful you are. You just know kind of that you've got that in you and you're contributing and serving the community around you. And so that part is what you can influence starting from today. So you can watch your beautiful brain and you can disprove the thoughts that say, I'm no good, I don't belong, I don't add value, and I'm not worthy. Those four parts don't get to live anymore. And what you're going to do is to start to say, Where's the evidence for I don't belong? Where's the evidence for I'm not good enough? Where's the evidence for I'm not lovable? And you're going to realize pretty quickly that the evidence that you've got is low. And if you find it's higher than you're comfortable with, your job is to start to act in ways every day that disprove that. And every day you notice the things you do that show you that you do belong, you belong to yourself, that you are loved, you love yourself, that you are good enough, you are good enough for yourself. And in doing that, when your brain says, well, here's the evidence for why I'm not good enough, why I don't belong, why I don't deserve to feel good or have good experiences in life, you can say, well, here's the list of things that I've done in the last 30 days that give me freedom from that belief. And when you've done that, my loves, you watch that self-esteem rise. When you watch that self-esteem rise, you watch how it impacts your marriage. And then you might find that you need to do some work on your marriage. And so I'd like to help with that. So I'm going to give you a link to my masterclass, and I'm going to give you a link to my calendar so you can book a free breakthrough call so that we can get you really clear on where to from here. My love, self-esteem is so important. You deserve to feel good. You deserve to feel like you belong. You deserve to feel like you are loved utterly and completely. And the very first way we do that is to give the gift of self-love to you and the gift of a high self-esteem for you. So any questions, leave them below. But I love you all. You belong. You are worthy. You are so important. And I want you to give yourself the gift of truly embodying that knowledge, because you are that. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, sweethearts. Thank you for tuning into today's show. If you're feeling fired up and you're ready to grow and you want to know more about how to do that, here is what I want you to do now. I want you to watch my marriage masterclass. This masterclass will show you how my clients have turned their struggling marriages into thriving marriages, even without their husband's buy-in. How my clients have gone from cycles of poor communication, disconnect and loneliness to being teammates and soulmates with their husbands again, even after they've already tried everything. And the proven system my clients use to start transforming their marriages in minutes, not years, because life is too precious to waste one more minute in an unhappy and unfulfilling marriage. So if this is what you're looking for, I want you to click the link